They say a mother's love has no limits. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's how I didn't notice the moment love turned into silence, and silence into erasure. I gave them my house, my hands, my history. And one morning, my son shoved me hard enough to remind me, I don't belong here anymore. But this isn't where my story ends. Saturday started the way most of mine do now, with a quiet cup of coffee in the converted shed behind my son's house, a place they so graciously call the in-law unit. The walls are thin enough to hear the dryer running in their house, the thump of someone jogging down the stairs, and the occasional bark from the neighbor's dog that still thinks I live next door like I did for 40 years. I don't. Not since I signed over the house 3 years ago. Just paperwork, Jason said. It'll make things easier for taxes, Mom. Funny how easier always ends up being easier for everyone but me. I still get up early. Habit, I guess. I used to make big breakfasts on Saturdays. Scrambled eggs, biscuits, bacon crisp, like Paul liked it. Pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse when Jason was little. Now I bake muffins. Mostly because it keeps my hands busy. Today it was blueberry, with lemon zest. I wrapped 6 in a paper towel and carried them across the patchy lawn, up to their back porch. I didn't even get to knock. Kara opened the door with her AirPods still in, like she was being interrupted. "Oh, hey," she said, her tone flat as yesterday's soda. Her eyebrows lifted just enough to make me feel like I was holding something ridiculous in my hands. "I made muffins," I said. "Thought the kids might want something fresh." She gave that tight smile I've come to know too well. "That's sweet, but we're kinda cutting sugar right now." I stood there for a second, like a Girl Scout who rang the wrong doorbell. "You can freeze them," I said quietly, already feeling stupid. "Or not." It's fine behind her. I could see the living room glowing with the cold light of tablets. My grandkids, Jake and Maddie, sat cross-legged on the couch, headphones on, eyes glazed over. Not even a glance toward the door. "I'll just leave them here," I said, and placed the napkin gently on the side table near the door frame. "Tell them Grandma says hi." "Sure," Kara said, already halfway turned. "Thanks again." The door shut a little too fast for someone saying thank you. Back in my little unit, I rinsed out the muffin bowl and stared out the window at the garage. Jason was under the car again. He spends more time with that damn thing than he does with his family. Used to be he'd come inside greasy and grinning, asking for a sandwich. Now I mostly get a nod if he sees me. I went out anyway. The sun had finally warmed the morning air, and my knees felt loose enough. "Need a hand?" I asked, standing a few feet back, so I wouldn't startle him. He didn't move from under the car. "Nope." I cleared my throat. "I brought muffins." He rolled out slowly on his creeper, wiped his hands with a rag, and squinted up at me. "Kara said you brought those? We're trying to eat clean." I let out a little breath. "Right. Well, just thought I'd say good morning." He nodded again, then ducked back under the car. So I walked back. Carefully, so I wouldn't slip on the uneven pavers I paid for when the backyard was redone. I opened my door, stepped into the stale coolness, and took off my shoes. My little corner of the world smelled like lavender dryer sheets and menthol cream. I sat at the table, the same one Paul built with his own hands, and stared at the photo on the wall. Me, Jason, and Paul, all beaming, in front of this very house. Jason was maybe 10. He had dirt on his chin and one front tooth missing. I reached out and touched the edge of the frame. "You wouldn't have liked this, Paul," I whispered. "Not one bit." I poured myself another cup of coffee, even though it was already cold, and sat quietly, the sound of their laughter muffled by a pane of glass and a decade of distance. Sunday morning I woke up to the sound of the garbage truck backing down the cul-de-sac, that slow grinding groan of machinery that rattled the window above my bed. I made oatmeal, sat at the little table with the crossword, and stared at the same 4 clues for over an hour without filling in a single one. My hand kept drifting toward the corner of the table where I'd left an envelope marked property records. I hadn't opened it in months. Didn't need to. I knew what it said. knew what I'd signed. But knowing and accepting are two different beasts. I had given Jason the house. Not because I wanted to, but because he asked with that same tone he used as a kid when he wanted a second popsicle. It's just paperwork, Mom. Keeps it in the family. You'll still live here. Nothing changes, except everything changed. The title was his. The taxes were his. The decisions, his. My name might still be on the mailbox, but legally, I had as much say as the squirrel living in the attic. I tried to forget all that when I walked over to bring Kara the Costco-sized bag of baby wipes she asked for last week. She had a coupon. I had the membership. Of course I picked it up. When I stepped inside, she was hosting one of her mompreneur meetups. 4 women I didn't recognize were seated around the island, sipping kombucha and talking about podcast algorithms. I hadn't even closed the door before Kara turned and said, "Oh, Mom, could you just leave it by the garage? We're in the middle of something." One of the women laughed and said, "Is that your MIL? She's cute." I set the wipes down and forced a smile. "Didn't realize you had company." Kara turned back to them without answering. Anyway, as I was saying, some people our age just don't get how much energy it takes to set boundaries. That one stung more than I expected. I walked out quietly, shut the door behind me, and stood for a long moment on the porch, trying not to let it settle. Back in my unit, I made tea and opened the envelope. The document was just as I remembered. Quitclaim deed, across the top in bold font. No room for sentiment, just lines and signatures. I read the fine print until the letters blurred. That afternoon, a letter from my insurance provider came. Medicare. It said my address had been updated in their system. I blinked at it. No, I hadn't changed anything. I logged in online using the same password I always used, Paul's badge number and the year we married, and there it was. A new primary address, Jason and Kara's, not mine. I walked across the lawn, the paper still in my hand. Kara was in the kitchen, eating salad out of a mixing bowl. "Did you update my Medicare address?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. She didn't even look up. "Jason took care of some paperwork for you." "It's no big deal. You changed my legal address. It's easier this way," she said. "For taxes. For emergencies. It's just admin stuff. Don't overreact." I stood there a beat too long, and she finally looked up. "Mom, seriously, you're making a thing out of nothing." Jason walked in then, drying his hands on a dish towel. "What's going on?" "She's upset about the Medicare form," Kara said. "Apparently helping is now a crime." Jason sighed. "Mom, come on. You always said you hated dealing with that stuff. We're trying to make things easier." I held up the letter. "You didn't ask. You didn't even tell me." His mouth tightened. "Because you'd make it complicated." "Because it's mine," I said, "and I deserve to know what's being done with my name." He stepped forward, not aggressive, but looming just enough. "You're being dramatic." That word again. I left before I said something I'd regret. Later that evening, I opened the cabinet under my bed. It's where I keep the older files, Paul's pension records, my will, the funeral plans we drew up when he first got sick. I pulled out the binder labeled house and started flipping. Mortgage payments, utility transfers, the notarized deed, and there, stuck between pages, was the receipt from the check I'd written 3 years ago, $30,000 for kitchen and backyard remodel. My handwriting? My savings. No one remembered. I sat back in the chair and stared at it. They had taken my money, my name, my address, and I'd let them. Not anymore. The wind picked up that night, sharp and dry the way it gets in Colorado before a storm. My knees ached before I even stood up. That's how I knew the weather was turning. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and stared out the window at the dark outline of their house. My house, just across the lawn. Porch light glowing like nothing was wrong. like the world hadn't tilted a few degrees off center. I called Sandra the next morning. She used to work for the county, social services, mostly elder care. We met through church potlucks, but she's the kind of woman you want in your corner when the world gets slippery. Something's not right, I said, once I explained what happened with the Medicare address and the paperwork. Sandra didn't interrupt, just listened, like someone who's heard too many stories that sound like mine. Linda, she finally said, do you want out of there? I hesitated. I don't know. I just want to be treated like a person, not like a storage box they can move around. She sighed, deep and tired. I'll text you the number of a good lawyer. You don't have to do anything yet. Just talk to her. See what your options are. The number came through 2 minutes later. Kathleen McCoy, elder law attorney. I saved it under Plan B. That evening, I heard them. Kara pacing upstairs, Jason talking low. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Sound just carries. But then I caught the phrase, sharp and sour. We might need to talk to someone about guardianship. She's not stable. I froze, cup of tea in hand. Guardianship. It rolled in my chest like gravel. That's what people file when someone's incapacitated, when they're trying to take control of someone's life. I didn't sleep that night, not because of the noise or the pain in my hip, but because of the quiet certainty building in my gut. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was a strategy. Next morning, the smell of gas hit me the moment I stepped into their house. Just a faint tang, like something left on too long. I walked into the kitchen and saw the stove burner barely flickering. I turned it off and opened a window. When Kara came in, phone in hand, she wrinkled her nose. Did you forget to shut the burner again? It wasn't me, I said. I haven't cooked in this kitchen in weeks. She scoffed. You sure about that? You've been a little scattered lately. It was the way she said it, like she wanted me to doubt myself. I didn't reply, just walked out. That afternoon, I called Kathleen. Her voice was calm, brisk, professional. She didn't rush me. When I explained the situation, she asked if I had documentation. I told her I had copies of the deed, the check, the Medicare letter. And have you experienced any threats, intimidation, or restriction of access to your finances or health decisions? I paused. Not in the way you're probably used to hearing it, but yes. I think so. We scheduled a meeting for Tuesday. That night I mentioned, casually I thought, to Jason that I'd spoken to a lawyer. He was standing at the sink, scraping dishes. He didn't turn around. A lawyer. Yes, I said, just for some clarity. He turned then, and the plate in his hand clattered into the sink. Why would you do that, Mom? Are you trying to start something? No, I said quietly. I'm trying to protect myself. He laughed, sharp and bitter. From what? Us? I didn't answer. I walked back to my little unit, closed the door, and locked it. First time I'd done that in years. The next morning, the lights didn't come on. No power. I checked the fuses. Nothing tripped. I stepped outside and followed the line of the cable across the yard. The breaker box behind the garage had been opened. The switch to my unit had been flipped off. I flipped it back on. Kara was standing at the patio door, holding a glass of something green and smug. Must have been a surge, she said too quickly. Those things happen. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Back inside, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the small leather notebook I used to keep recipes in. Now it held a different kind of inventory. Dates, incidents, quotes. I wrote it all down. October 5th. Gas burner on. Power switched off. Kara said I was scattered. Jason called the lawyer, starting something. Underneath it, I wrote one word in capital letters. Escalation. The morning started with a brittle kind of calm, the kind you get right before a branch snaps under too much weight. I had a doctor's appointment scheduled for the afternoon, just a follow-up for my blood pressure. But I was up early, knees cracking, the kettle already hissing before the sun touched the porch. I hadn't slept much, kept hearing Kara's voice in my head, replaying that moment at the breaker box like a loop I couldn't mute. Must have been a surge. The way she smiled when she said it, that half laugh people give when they're already sure no one will believe you. I baked scones. It sounds silly, I know, but baking has always been my way of claiming space, of saying, I'm still here. I had just finished dusting them with a bit of cinnamon sugar when I noticed the garbage can in the driveway knocked over. Wind, maybe. Or something else. I went outside, barefoot, and bent down to pick it up. My left arm tugged the wrong way. Just a pinch, but a warning. When I stepped back inside, I placed the scones on a tray, and like a fool, decided to bring them into the main house. Maybe I still believed that a warm biscuit could thaw whatever ice had settled between us. I didn't knock this time, just walked in. The kitchen was quiet. Too quiet. Then the creak of a door upstairs, the low murmur of voices. I heard Kara first. She's doing it on purpose, she said. Wants to make us look like the villains. Jason's reply was a grumble I couldn't catch. I stepped toward the hallway just as Kara's voice raised. She thinks she's on a TV show or something. All those dramatic pauses. Protect myself. Please, I turned to leave. My foot caught the edge of the rug near the door, and the tray slipped. The scones hit the floor with a soft thud, cinnamon scattering like confetti across the tiles. The clatter was loud enough to bring Jason downstairs. He saw me standing there with the overturned tray and said, "What the hell, Mom?" "I was just bringing breakfast," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Kara came in behind him. Her eyes were sharp, arms crossed. "We don't need you barging in here like you still run this place." "I didn't barge," I said. "I used my key." "Maybe it's time you stopped doing that," Jason said. "You can't just walk in anymore." "I used to own this house," I snapped, before I could stop myself. "I paid for the door you're telling me not to use." Jason stepped forward, fast and heavy-footed. "Stop living in the past," he said. "This isn't your house. This isn't your life to control. I don't know what came over me then. Rage, maybe. Or something more fragile." I said, "No, you're right. It's not my house anymore. I gave it to someone who doesn't even know what a mother's sacrifice looks like." Something behind his eyes went hard. He reached for the tray, like he meant to shove it out of the way, but his arm caught mine instead. Not a punch, not even a full-force push, but enough. Enough to knock me off balance. I stumbled backward, hit the edge of the sideboard. My hip caught first, then my shoulder slammed against the corner. My cheek dragged along the wall. A hot, searing tear zipped up my arm. I collapsed in a heap. The tray rolled under the dining table. My glasses flew off. Everything went quiet. Then Kara's voice, cold as a faucet in winter. "God, you're acting like it's TV." Jason just stood there, frozen. I couldn't speak at first. The pain was sharp, like glass under skin. My left arm didn't feel right. My face stung. I don't remember getting up. Just remember the floor tile against my palms. The sting of humiliation hotter than the bruise forming beneath my skin. Jake, my oldest grandson, stood at the top of the stairs. I didn't even realize he was there until I heard the ding of a phone camera. He didn't say anything, just backed up, quiet, eyes wide. I walked out the door. I didn't cry. Not in front of them. My legs shook, but I made it across the lawn, back to my little room. Called 911 with the kind of calm I didn't know I had left. The EMTs arrived in under 10 minutes. A young man named Brandon asked what happened. I told him I'd been shoved. He looked at my shoulder, already swelling, and nodded. "We'll take you in. Possible dislocation. Maybe a fracture. You hit that wall hard." "In the ambulance?" I closed my eyes. Brandon asked gently. Did someone do this to you, ma'am? I opened my eyes and looked him straight in the face. Yes, I said. My son did. And I didn't take it back. The ER smelled like bleach and plastic, and something sharp I couldn't name. They wheeled me in and asked me questions. What happened? Where did it hurt? Could I wiggle my fingers? My shoulder throbbed like it had a heartbeat of its own, and the left side of my face burned, raw and angry. But I answered everything clearly. No slurring. No confusion. I wanted that on the record. The doctor, a young woman named Patel, was gentle but firm. You've got a dislocated shoulder and contusions on your cheekbone and arm. We'll need to run a CT just to rule out a fracture. All right, I said, but I want someone from Adult Protective Services here. She blinked just once, then nodded. I'll make the call. They tucked me into a curtained room with a warm blanket, and for the first time in days, I felt something close to safety. Not peace exactly, but a pause, enough to breathe. The social worker arrived an hour later. Her name was Leanne. Late 30s, kind eyes, no nonsense. She didn't ask me if I'd fallen. She asked, "Who hurt you, and how often has this happened?" I told her everything. Not just the shove, the Medicare change, the power cutoff, the gas stove, the broken boundaries, the eroded trust, the way I stopped being someone and became inventory. She took notes without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her notebook and said, "You're not the first mother to sit in this chair and say those words." That hit me harder than anything else. She gave me a folder of resources: legal aid, shelters, crisis counselors. I kept the folder. But what I clung to most was the name she gave me next: Kathleen McCoy. I smiled. Already got her on speed dial. I called Kathleen from the hospital bed. She picked up on the first ring. I didn't cry, though my voice cracked a little. "I'm ready," I said. "I'll meet you there," she said. "You don't need to do this alone." True to her word, she walked into the hospital 2 hours later in jeans and a blazer, carrying a messenger bag and a small laptop. She looked about my granddaughter's age, but when she spoke, it was with the weight of 10,000 women like me. We sat together while she reviewed the documents I'd brought, scanned everything into her system: deed transfer, the $30,000 check receipt, my Medicare change letter. Then she said, "Linda, I think we can file for an injunction. You've got a case for elder abuse, emotional, financial, and now physical." I nodded. "Let's do it." That night, Jason was questioned by police. He said I slipped. He said I was confused. But Jake had filmed it. Not the whole shove, but enough of the shouting. Enough of my face hitting the wall. Kathleen got the footage. She said, "It's not perfect, but it's damning." I didn't know how to feel about Jake, my own grandson, just standing there with a phone. But he'd saved the clip. He didn't delete it. And maybe that meant something. The next morning I had a visitor. Her name was Violet. She was in the bed next to mine, separated by a curtain that we both pretended didn't exist until she spoke. "Heard you talking to your lawyer," she said. Her voice was gravel and grace. "Sorry," I said. "Didn't mean to bother you." "You didn't." She shifted in bed, her wrist in a brace. "My daughter tried to put me in a nursing home without telling me. Just took my keys one day and said, 'You're done driving,' like I'm a dog that got too old to fetch." I looked at her, really looked. She wore a silk scarf around her head, and her nails were painted coral pink. "You fought back?" "Damn right I did," she said. "Got a restraining order and moved in with my niece. There's more of us than you think." We talked until the nurse came to check our vitals. When she left, Violet said, "You should keep in touch with that lawyer. She's not just some girl with a degree. She's a fighter." I smiled. So am I. That afternoon, Kathleen filed the paperwork for a temporary restraining order. Jason and Kara weren't allowed to contact me, visit me, or access my bank accounts. She also filed an emergency motion to freeze any pending legal actions on the house. Step by step, she said. First, we secure your safety. Then we get your house back. One of the nurses brought in a portable printer and scanner, so I could sign the affidavits right from my bed. The hospital social worker stood as witness. When I signed the final page, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. Kathleen stood, packing her bag. We'll schedule the first hearing for next week. The judge will want to see you. Don't worry, I'll be right beside you. Before she left, she handed me a note card. On it was a quote, handwritten in pen. You are not alone. You never were. You were just made to feel that way. I tucked it into the folder, right next to the receipt with my $30,000. Both now were evidence. This wasn't over. Not even close. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not just the air, though the AC was cranked up like they were preserving meat, but the whole building. Everything hard, beige, impersonal. The chairs in the waiting area were molded plastic, and the only color in the room came from the artificial ficus dying in the corner. I sat there in a clean blouse and slacks, arms still in a sling, face still mottled with the fading bruises Jason gave me. Kathleen sat next to me, flipping through her notes, calm as a surgeon. I admired that. Her steadiness, her refusal to look even a little uncertain. Jason walked in 10 minutes before the hearing. Kara wasn't with him. He looked tired, thinner maybe, but that didn't move me anymore. He barely looked at me, just sat across the room, fiddling with his wedding ring. The judge was a woman, early 60s, gray bob, the kind of expression that said she'd heard it all but still cared enough to keep listening. That, right there, gave me hope. Kathleen presented the case like she was building a house, floor by floor. She started with the property records, showed how I'd signed over the deed under familial pressure, then added financial documentation. My check for $30,000, Medicare address change without consent, the manipulation of my utility, access. Then came the police report, medical files, and the video. It wasn't a long clip, less than 30 seconds, but it showed enough. My voice, rising, Jason's hand, the impact, my fall. When it ended, the courtroom was quiet except for the judge's pen scratching notes. Jason claimed I was confused. He said I was having memory issues, that I tripped. Kathleen pulled out my CT scans. She had no signs of neurological damage, no instability, no record of cognitive decline. Just injuries. And evidence Jason fumbled. His attorney tried to pivot, to frame this as a family misunderstanding. Mr. Bishop was overwhelmed, the man said. He has financial burdens, 2 children, a demanding job. He regrets. The judge raised a hand. We're not here to evaluate his regrets. We're here to evaluate her rights. Those words hummed in my chest like a church bell. In the end, the judge ruled in our favor. The quitclaim deed was declared invalid on grounds of undue influence. Full title to the property reverted to me. The judge gave Jason and Kara 30 days to vacate the home. The restraining order remained in effect. I could choose whether or not to amend it later. I didn't say a word as Jason stood and walked out of the courtroom. But I saw his eyes, and for once, they looked small, like the little boy he used to be. But smaller still, because now I knew what he'd grown into. 2 weeks later, I had new locks installed. A locksmith named Richie, young, polite, offered to carry out the old brass hardware to the trash without even being asked. I tipped him $20 and told him I'd recommend him to the neighbors. He smiled like that actually meant something. I repainted the front door. Deep blue. Paul's favorite. Took down the video doorbell Jason had installed and put up a welcome sign I'd carved years ago. It said, simply, "Peace lives here." Jake came by the following Saturday. He stood on the porch for a while before ringing the bell. He held his phone in one hand, backpack slung over his shoulder. "Hi, Grandma," he said when I opened the door. He looked older than I remembered. 13 going on 30. I saved that video, he said. I didn't know what to do. But I knew it wasn't okay. I looked at him, this tall, awkward boy with guilt in his shoulders. Thank you, I said. You did the right thing. He looked like he might cry. But instead he said, Can I come in? Of course, I said. You were always welcome. That never changed. Later that month, I posted an ad online. Room available in quiet home. Ideal for student, nurse, or single mother. Respectful household. Within a week, I met Ashley, 26, nursing program. Single mom to a 3-year-old with the loudest giggle I'd heard in ages. They moved into the spare bedroom. I helped them paint it yellow. We have tea together sometimes in the evenings. She tells me about her rotations, and I help her practice for her exams. Her daughter calls me Miss Linda, which makes me smile every time. I still write in the little notebook I started when everything began. But now the entries are about grocery lists and paint swatches. Sometimes I just write the date and underline it. Not because something bad happened, but because nothing did. And that matters too. Yesterday, I got a card in the mail. No return address, but I recognized Kathleen's handwriting. You are stronger than you seem, braver than you believe, and more powerful than they ever imagined. She wasn't wrong. I was here first, and now I'm here to stay.